Hello. This is my presentation, Climate Change, Racism, and You. And basically, I'm going to be talking about our work in Detox NJ and what we're fighting against and how it relates to racism and also feminism. Um, this is just a brief table of contents. So we're going to be talking about Superfund sites, intersectionality, and what we're doing now, as I just said. Okay. So who am I? Hi, obviously my name is Audrey Ng and I'm Detox NJ's Director of Communications. And what that means is basically I handle overall communications, whether that's outreach, advocacy, or recruitment. And so I have three amazing directors under me, kind of, who are also doing that work. And yeah, also, my role as Director of Communications is to basically create training and workshops for our members. So we did an email etiquette workshop a while back and an interview conduct workshop. So I'm a Chinese American female, currently a high school senior, and I'm most passionate about anti-racism, environmental justice, and food security. So Detox New Jersey, what is that? I'll be talking more about what Superfund sites are exactly, but we are a youth-led environmental organization based in New Jersey and dealing with the dangers of Superfund sites. Our mission, this is our mission statement, we aim to serve disadvantaged communities facing health risks posed by toxic waste at Superfund sites by bringing the issue into public discourse. And we say bringing it into public discourse because most people don't really know what Superfund sites are exactly. A lot of people have never heard of them, even though they have been existing for years, and they are actually a huge environmental issue that relates to everyone. And it's, even though environmentalism tends to be leaning left these days, it really is a nonpartisan issue. So Superfund sites. Okay, so Superfund sites are contaminated sites formed by toxic waste dumping that are all over the country. They affect every single state, and they're typically created by chemical manufacturers. So the reason why it's called Superfund is because of CERCLA, and that is the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, and that was created in 1980 to deal with the toxic waste crisis. So it's called Superfund because basically what was created was a super trust fund that was supposed to be funded by taxes on the potentially responsible parties, meaning chemical manufacturers and people who would have created these sites. That obviously didn't really end up working out too well because here we are 40 years later with still so much toxic waste on our hands. But the circular goals are supposed to be protecting civilian health and the environment, charging responsible parties for cleanup, involving communities in the process, and returning Superfund sites to productive use. Okay, so again, why is this still an issue we're dealing with? Well, large part of it is bureaucracy. So everything goes through the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is supposed to handle how to clean up and litigation with the potentially responsible parties to make sure that people pay for it. But a lot of this falls through, and an example of this is the fish swap program. And so this is a ridiculous example of how polluters attempt to evade cleanup costs. So in the Passaic River, which is here in New Jersey, the entire Passaic River is basically a Superfund site because chemical manufacturers in Newark used to just dump chemicals in the river. Now, a lot of a lot of low-income families would fish in the river just to survive, right? Because maybe they didn't have enough money to buy food. But what it ended up happening was the fish were contaminated with dioxins, and cooking them only made it worse. So instead of the companies cleaning up the Passaic River, which by the way is still a huge problem right now, instead of that happening, they simply decided to say, hey, give us the fish that you get out of the river and we'll give you frozen tilapia. And that's one of the many ways that responsible parties try to get out of paying for the full cleanup cost because it is really expensive. The most Superfund sites are in New Jersey, obviously, which is a huge problem because it is the most densely populated state, which means that every square mile has more people on average than in any other state in the country. But we have the most Superfund sites, 150 in total. Only 35 have been cleaned up so far. Then there's Pennsylvania and California, where Annalise is from. You guys have 105 Superfund sites. So obviously we know that this is a huge problem, but why? So here are some of the health risks involved. Birth defects, cancer, internal damage, and mental illness. Anyone living near a Superfund site is far more likely to get any of these or to be born with any of these just off the jump, just because they live nearby chemicals. And we'll get into that, but a lot of it has to do with affecting mothers' placentas, which has to do with the feminism aspect of this. Child development. So you are 6.6% more likely to get suspended, 7.4% more likely to repeat a grade, and 10% more likely to be diagnosed with a cognitive disability if you live near a Superfund site. And now we're getting to intersectionality. So in America, we have this kind of obscure phrase. I don't know if you ever heard of it. All men are created equal. I don't know if you know that, but so we've learned in several different ways that this isn't true in this country, and the effects of Superfund sites continue to show that. If all people were created equal, then why are children born with birth defects, increased risks of deficiencies, and cancers just because the government decided to prioritize the finances of chemical manufacturers? The same manufacturers also that have been poisoning mothers' placentas and family bloodlines, especially those of racial minorities, for decades. So inside and outside of the womb, affected peoples are immediately set back when you consider property value, health risks, generational bills, and generational health bills and generational impact. Okay, so here are a few statistics of discrimination. So in South Carolina, so African Americans living in South Carolina, 55.9% of them live in Superfund host census tracts, which just means they live within 5 or less miles of a Superfund site. So again, with race, but also with poverty, so there are about 700 federally assisted housing units located by the Superfund site in Carteret, New Jersey. Now in Carteret, New Jersey, they have a overwhelming population of Hispanics, Asians, and Blacks, and also this is a low-income community and located right by a Superfund site. So about 25% is the increased risk of having a child with congenital birth defects, congenital just meaning that it's present at birth. So if you live near a Superfund site, you are 20 to 25% more likely off the jump to have a child with birth defects. And poverty, again, 70% of all Superfund sites are located within 1 mile of federally assisted housing. So going to the feminism aspect, women living near a Superfund site are more likely to develop leukemia, are more likely to develop bladder cancer, and also they're far more likely, like I said before, to have children with birth defects. So going on to the racism aspect of it, which is partially kind of why I joined Detox to begin with, because that is one of my main issues of interest. So environmental racism is when environmental injustices have a racially discriminative context, whether by practice or by policy. Now, here's a not so fun trivia question. What do Shaq O'Neal, Michael B. Jordan, and Agent Orange all have in common? They're all from Newark. Now, Agent Orange is a herbicide that maybe wasn't developed in Newark, but it was created in a chemical manufacturer called Diamond Alkali Company in Newark. And so this was an herbicide that was used in the Vietnam War as chemical warfare to destroy a bunch of their plant life. And this was being created and dumped right in a Superfund site in Newark. And so all the health risks of having that were directly went to the minority community in Newark. And that's obviously where Shaq O'Neal and Michael B. Jordan are from. So, and so in my county, which is where Newark is, So Essex County has 10 Superfund sites in total. 4 of these are just in Newark. And there are, I want to say, 12 or 15 towns in this county alone. So that's insane. So here we have a map of like racial scattering, I guess you could say, in New Jersey. Just as an example, so the more red you get, the more white the area is. So if we're looking at the paler areas, you could say, so just focus on these, and then we go to this map, and you can see that a lot of these Superfund sites are concentrated right by those areas that are less white. So if that wasn't enough, here's just a really basic graph that I created myself a while ago. So I was looking into it, and I was literally counting each and every single Superfund site in New Jersey. And 101 out of the 150 Superfund sites that have existed in total were in or near communities with mostly racial minorities. So only 49 of these Superfund sites were located in more white communities. And that just goes to show how much racism is a part of the issue of Superfund sites and environmentalism in general, right? And then it also affects women, especially minority women. So much of this problem affects every single person, but again, not all men are created equal, and unfortunately there are some people who are impacted way more. So now, what is Detox NJ doing in order to counter this? So Detox NJ, here, actually let me stop sharing because I don't need this anymore. Okay. So basically, Detox NJ, we've only started in the last few months, in August, actually. So what we've done so far is we're still in the middle of gathering intel, gathering insider information. More recently, we talked to Governor Florio, who was the former governor of New Jersey. He is super old now, 83, but he actually authored CERCLA, the Superfund law, back in 80. So yeah, so we've been talking to these people. We've been talking to EPA directors, EPA attorneys, policymakers, such as Delegate Von Stewart. So Delegate Von Stewart is someone who actually lives in Maryland, not New Jersey, but he was impacted by a Superfund site when he was born, because his mother was impacted by a Superfund site in Alabama, where he grew up. Her placenta was concentrated with PCBs, which are a chemical that made him grow up to eventually have cancer right out of high school. So he had 2 different bouts of cancer, and that's how he grew up. And he didn't even live right by it. He actually lived a couple miles away from the Superfund site. So these are the types of people we've talked to, and so far what we've been doing are talking to these people, seeing the different perspectives, talking to communities that have been affected. We've talked to the Passaic River CAG Community Advisory Group, as well as others in Ironbound, which is in Newark. And we've tried to get all these different perspectives so far to push for that information, all the information that we can possibly get, to show it to our communities, to communities that are more privileged and aren't as heavily affected by Superfund sites. So far, we've been educating our own members, but also educating our communities. Soon, we do have a presentation at a nearby town to talk about Superfund sites to a bunch of parents. So that'll be fun. But also, thank you. But also, a lot of our fight is just getting the word out there. So like I said earlier, bringing this into public discourse. Sometimes we just don't get to talk about an issue enough because there are so many issues out there. Obviously, BLM is an issue. Not BLM itself, but what it deals with is an issue. And then we have a bunch of different economic crises right now with COVID, and we also have, obviously the health crisis. So things like these kind of take a forefront. And what we want to do is try to push Superfund sites in everyone's mind enough to the point where we can get this to be an issue that everyone actually wants to get done soon. And so this issue has existed for 40 plus years. CERCLA was created 40 years ago, and they thought we were going to be able to delete all the Superfund sites off the national priorities list within like a decade or so. That didn't happen. Not at all. In New Jersey, 150 sites in total, only 35 sites have been cleaned up in 40 years. And those were the quote-unquote easy sites, as one EPA attorney called it. So obviously it is an issue that has been around for a while, and even so, a lot of people don't know about it. I didn't come into this knowing at all what it was about, and then as I learned more, I was like, oh crap, this is a huge issue. If I asked my classmates, I would say 90% of our grade would not know what it is. Their parents probably wouldn't know what it is. Even though we have 2 teachers that I know of in our school that have directly been impacted by them. So one of our teachers actually grew up, she went to a junior high school that was built on a Superfund site because it was supposed to be cheaper land. And so this teacher, a lot of her teachers just suddenly started getting cancer, and they were like, oh my gosh, why are all of our staff members suddenly getting cancer? It's because they were on a Superfund site. One of our teachers actually grew up on a Superfund site that was created by the company, owned by his friend's dad, and they used it as a shooting range. So it's a really big issue that not a lot of people know about, but a lot of people are impacted by, and in order to actually have people hear about it and have people talk about it and want to change this for the better, we have to spread awareness, and that is what Detox NJ is doing. A lot of, I forgot what I was going to say. A lot of communities actually have no clue that it exists because they live in more privileged communities where they have more resources available to them, where if they did have a Superfund site, it was cleaned up years ago because the government is more likely to listen to privileged communities and communities with money than communities like Newark, where it's mostly minorities, and they're like, well, we don't care, you have the industrial stuff that we need, you can help yourselves. And that's why it's such a big issue, and that's why in Ironbound they know what it is and we don't. So in order to make this a statewide thing, at least in New Jersey, we wanted to have every single town that we possibly could get raise this as an issue and join forces with and support and uplift these disadvantaged communities. Obviously, in the future, we would love to have Detox California or Detox Colorado or Detox Pennsylvania, because again, these issues are represented everywhere in the country. Wow, I say a lot. But yeah, so that's what we're doing right now. We are a relatively small group of just 30 members right now, about 30 members, which is actually pretty crazy for a group that's only been alive for a few months. But, hopefully in the future, what we can get is partners around the country to fight for this. And of course, because there is so much intersectionality with ecofeminism and anti-racism, this is an issue that we really want to bring to everyone's minds, to every organization's, every nonprofit, or every advocate's minds, just because this is something that they can definitely learn about and expand upon in their own fights for equality. And yeah, that is my presentation. It's so funny seeing you guys clap, but I can't hear anything.
Thank you so much, Audrey. That was an amazing presentation, and you definitely see how this relates to feminism and racism, and with your knowledge, it's really contagious. Like, so many people will benefit from learning about Superfund sites because even your presentation shows how connected all of these issues are and how we can begin to unite. And you've done such a great job working on Detox NJ. What you do is really inspiring for so many. And like personally, I didn't know what Superfund sites were until this year, probably this summer, when I also did a project on the EPA and what they do, and I realized, oh, yeah, Superfund sites are this huge thing. And California, like you said, Audrey, is the third largest concentration, has the third largest concentration of Superfund sites. And yeah, it's really incredible how we can know basically so little about the land that we're on, and even thinking about like indigenous ways that we have overlooked. And yeah, there's so many things to discuss through this. So thank you for beginning such an incredible discussion on this, and continue your amazing work. You are all incredible people. Thank you.
Thank you so much.